Good morning, good day, good night, depends where you are. We always say that because we have a global audience. And it's my great pleasure today to start our 10th episode of a Bioverse, which is actually technically the 12th episode of a Bioverse. So this is a special episode. This is our 1-year anniversary, and it's really a very special one from another sense because we have two new guests to our webinar series. And, for the people who just dial in Bioverse for the first time, let me share with you who we are so you know who you are talking with today. Give me 1 second. I will load our introduction slide deck. And please, everyone, let me know whether you see it right, because we also have some technical challenge. So if you see everything's okay, please give me a thumb up. Okay, perfect. All right, so like I said, this is a Bioverse episode 10, which today we will talk about the winner, loser, and dark horses of ASCO. Is really try to recap the major presentation at ASCO. Of course, two of our very, very dedicated speaker, Ramon Angus, right now actually is just over 6 a.m. in San Diego are attending BIO. So we will hear from them a little bit tidbits from the BIO2024 as well. Before we get into the content of today, I want to give everyone a little bit idea who we are. So Bioverse is a monthly show co-produced by SAPA-GP, which is a Sino-American Pharmaceutical Professional Association, the largest ex-China, ethnic Chinese focused global pharmaceutical professional association in the world, as well as InScienceWeTrust community, which is where I founded along with a small group of volunteers. And both of us are for registered nonprofit in the United States, and we either serve the local ethnic Chinese or Asian professional in pharmaceutical industry, which is the case for SAPA-GP, or global Asian, generally Asian, ethnic Asian professionals in this industry, which is the case for InScienceWeTrust community. Today is my great honor to have, like I said, the renowned speakers with decades of experiences to join us, share their insights from ASCO 2024, as well as a little bit of BIO 2024. I will give a quick introduction, and you can look at their impressive resume yourself. Go to our website. First, Madeleine Armstrong. She's a senior reporter from Apex Onco. Oh, by the way, if I butcher your organization name, please let me know. This is a little bit, sometimes, right now we have been creating new words. Sometimes I have a little bit challenge, but let me try it again. She's a senior reporter from Apex Onco. Hopefully I get it right. And she has been writing this for cover biotech medical devices and working in many leading news organizations for over a decade. The second, Ramon Valencia. He is a VP of Global Business Development of Seacross Pharma, which he just joined recently. Before that, he was a VP BD of SystImmune. If you may recall, he actually led the largest BD out-license deal in China biotech history with the SystImmune, which is a subsidiary of Sichuan Baili in China. The third is my friend and also the volunteer of the InScienceWeTrust community. And typically he will introduce himself, but it's too early for him, so I will do that for Angus. He is a deputy editor of Fierce Pharma. He's well read by a lot of us in our community, and he had been covering ASCO, have a lot of prolific publications of the leading abstract, the presentation at ASCO. So I'm really curious about what Angus and Madeleine have to say about ASCO. The last and definitely the least is myself. I don't need to introduce myself, and everyone hopefully know me, and so I'll skip that. So this is what we're going to do today. this is based on our preparation of among all of us. So we just make some quick judgment without discussion in a group. What we think the three major vertical of the ASCO abstract, we put them into practice changing trials. Typically, the phase 3 trials were like need approval and get into the NCCN guideline or whatever guideline you may follow. The second one is really early stage or mid-stage clinical trial results tied to major market move for the company who did the trial. The last one is something people didn't expect, either good news or bad news, but largely good news. So that's what we call the dark horses. Of course, we want to highlight Chinese ADC because that's kind of one of a major topic in town. And of course, the last but definitely not the least is bio-tidbits. And I will give you one teaser. We got some breaking news a few hours ago, so you definitely want to stay with us. This is how we're going to do this today. So I'm going to be largely stay in the background and help go through all those major news and presentation one by one. And one of our speaker will take the lead to give you a quick idea and give you a little bit insights beyond the headline, beyond the data. And we're going to try to limit our time for each abstract in 3.5 minutes because I have so much to cover. And most importantly, I want to save some time for the discussion with the audience because we expect a lot of questions from the audience as well. By the way, for the audience who dialed into our webinar, please use a Q&A to ask questions so that all the audience can see it. Please do not use the chat box because that's sometimes we just ignore it. Again, please use the Q&A if you have any question, and we can address all the questions after we finish the presentation, and we're probably going to leave around 10 minutes, plenty of time to address that question. All right, let's get started. First one, I think this one is from Angus, and you want to say something about this?
Yeah, thanks, Leon. So this is about Tagrisso, AstraZeneca's EGFR inhibitor, which I think everybody in the oncology world knows too well. This is about, they have metastatic, obviously they're the standard of care in the first line metastatic EGFR mutated non-small cell lung cancer setting. And they also have an approval in FDA approval in the adjuvant setting in resectable non-small cell lung cancer. And now this LAURA trial is about moving this drug to stage 3 unresectable non-small cell lung cancer. To be honest, this is kind of the way that you typically expect, just because how established Tagrisso is in the EGFR setting. But still, the PFS is quite impressive, 84% reduction in the risk of progression or death against placebo. So this is very, this study, the results received a standing ovation at ASCO, but I have to say, not as impressive or as exciting as perhaps EV302 or even Destiny Breast 04 study before the standing ovation, this excitement you saw at those studies. Again, this is, like I said, this is largely expected, and I think doctors typically view this as practice changing because there is also an overall survival trend in favor of Tagrisso, despite having, I think, around 80% of patients in the placebo arm going on to receive crossover and receive Tagrisso later. So there is a roughly 20% favorable trend or OS trend at this point. And I think the investigators were expecting to have a more mature OS data readout in about 18 months, 24 months. So we will need to wait to see that. Remember, in the adjuvant setting, Tagrisso last year showed an overall survival, statistically significant overall survival benefit in the adjuvant setting. So we would be excited to see what this stage 3 disease setting is going to bring.
If I can just chime in on this one, if that's okay. I think part of the problem with this crossover, this very large crossover figure, is that this is being given as like a maintenance therapy, but it sort of now becomes a comparison of a trial of Tagrisso immediately after, or a trial of Tagrisso once patients have progressed. And I think that sort of makes it a bit hard to interpret until we get with all this crossover, it's quite hard to interpret this result. And I think there's still questions now about when is the best place to use Tagrisso, despite the excitement over this study.
Yeah, I think there was also some hesitance around the adjuvant data when that adjuvant data read out. A lot of the doctors were waiting to see it became. I think the crossover in that trial was fewer patients actually got Tagrisso in the control arm in the adjuvant setting. So there was still some noise going on about whether it is really a Tagrisso versus Tagrisso in the later line kind of a comparison. But this one is definitely going to be that, given the huge crossovers. It will be a Tagrisso earlier line versus Tagrisso later line, even though the company would totally deny that kind of comparison. But we know this is that comparison where we're going to know a little bit better which setting or which line Tagrisso should be used. Yeah.
I actually have only one question for you, because obviously I'm so happy I didn't go to any presentation in person. So was this only presentation that received a standing ovation on this year's ASCO, to your knowledge?
Madeleine, I didn't go to a lot of presentations. This one, the standing ovation, I saw it online, not in person. It's just tons of interviews going on at the same time. Madeleine, if you know.
I believe I didn't go to these either, because the plenaries were all covered in the press schedule, the press briefings. But I believe Adriatic might have also got a standing ovation as well. The Imfinzi trial.
I see.
Imfinzi, limited stage small cell lung cancer.
Yeah.
Both AstraZeneca studies, both preliminary.
I see. So now we are aware of two. I just want to use this as a quick benchmark of how oncologists view this, right? Because we tend to have a little bit different perspective. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. I think next one's Madeleine.
Sure. So this is Destiny Breast 06, a study of Enhertu. Obviously, everybody knows Enhertu. It's been a huge drug, but initially it was restricted to patients with HER2, and then now it's approved also for HER2-low breast cancer. But now it looks like it might also end up being used in these like HER2 ultra-low patients. So that's quite exciting, I guess, for Astra, because it's going to expand the amount of patients who could potentially get this. I think we've got here to 85% of all the HER2, supposedly HER2 negative patients. But I mean, we noticed a few reasons to be cautious about these results. I mean, first of all, they showed similar survival in the HER2 low and the ultra low, so that's a good thing. But the discussant raised some concerns about toxicity and was quite cagey, I guess, about saying whether this was practice changing and whether this should be used in a very broad patient population. So the other thing is that IHC testing is for HER2 is notoriously not very good. So even detecting these patients is a bit of a challenge until we get some better tests. Angus, I don't know if you want to add anything on that one too.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lack of excitement, I should say, compared with Destiny Breast 04. That speaks to, I think at the press conference also, the discussion was like, this is not, just went out and said it, this isn't going to be for every patient. Obviously, about the toxicity profile of the ILD, the interstitial lung disease. And to me, what is interesting was this kind of a declining in effect size from Destiny Breast 04 to 06. There is the 38 was not the 50% that you saw in Destiny Breast 04. So I asked AstraZeneca's oncology R&D chief, Susan Galbraith, Dr. Susan Galbraith, about this. It was like, you're supposed to going into even earlier line, even though that trial design is not out yet. What do you think about this declining declining PFS effect, at least the hazard ratio, shrinking hazard ratio, and there is the ILD problem because analysts were saying you need a big treatment effect to kind of compensate for your ILD problem, especially in the frontline setting. And she was saying basically there might be some patient selection that AstraZeneca will do as they move into an early line setting to see where CDK4 inhibitors, CDK4/6 inhibitors might not have been doing so well so far. So that's what they are looking at right now to kind of maximize the success rate in the early line setting. So that's what I was interested in. And also, you mentioned, man, on the difficulty in identifying patients. I think during the press conference, ASCO's Chief Medical Officer, Julie Grallo, she also mentioned this, that they're going to have a really hard discussion with the pathologist because I see, as you mentioned, it was difficult to read. And right now, they are even trying to break up the IHC0 category, which was not, the test was not designed to do that. So how do you even identify them? Well, the AstraZeneca and Daiichi Sankyo, they were like, with this ultra low population, we're trying to ask, say, is there even a faint staining that you could see on the test versus none at all? They were saying that this is very dichotomy that you could easier to identify. But in the end of the day, Dr. Guello of ASCO, she happens to be a cancer expert. She was saying that she was just not sure if human eye would be that, but really see that little difference of whether there is staining there or not. This patient selection matters, I think, because if you miss all of the patients, you couldn't decide whether they're true negative or HER2 ultra low. You're going to misidentify or miss a lot of patients if you couldn't do that. That's it from me, Leon.
Yeah, fantastic. So I think we probably a little bit faster than this one. We use like 5 minutes. I'm just kidding. Let's move to the next one. And I think the next one is also Angus. Continue, please.
I think this is one of the things about ALK inhibitors. Roche Alecensa is kind of more used in this setting, and Pfizer is trying to show more data to be competitive. The data was just there's no debate about that. Like PFS benefit 81%. What else do you need? So this is really kind of the practice changing that we're talking about. The problem is, as many as noted, and kind of the status quo being Alecensa the leading market share in the ALK, at least in the frontline setting, not Lorbrena right now, is because it's neurotoxicity. And this is a problem that remains to be a problem, I think, for some of the doctors. I also happen to have asked Sunaid, Pfizer's U.S. commercial chief, about this. Like, you have this neurotoxicity, what are you going to do with it? He basically said it's just worth it. It might require some extra management, disease management for the CNS side effects, but he said just based on this effect size, it's worth it. So we'll see. Some doctors might be converted to Lorbrena from Alecensa, but this might some might still be worried, especially in the frontline setting, to stick with Alecensa. And there's also like a lack of data on how you could treat patients who relapse from Lorbrena, whereas I think some doctors are using Lorbrena in the second line after some of the frontline ALK inhibitors. So there is also the potential of reserving another treatment option in the second line, so they're not using it in the front line.
I also saw some criticisms of this study that, why is it comparing Lorbrena against Xalkori when maybe it should have been comparing it against Alecensa all along?
Well, I think it's always going to be hard for the industry to do these kind of head-to-head studies. They're just avoid it in every way.
Yeah. So, looks like there's a lot of wrinkles on this. A lot of media kind of claim this as a kind of clear win. There's no doubt. Some Chinese actually WeChat article even said this is the most important article, presentation from ASCO. I already had a doubt. So it sounds like, probably this probably doesn't justify to be the most important abstract. Madeleine, you mentioned the control arm should have been something else. That's one. Another thing is that, Angus mentioned there's some tox concern that prevent the doctors really adapt to this or switch to this. Another thing is I would also want to point it out, from like a commercial point of view, I think this drug's sales last year is less than $1 billion. So people should not forget, this is very, very rare, not super rare, but like 1% of a non-cancer patient would have this mutation. That's number one. Number two, but of course, I think the reason why this abstract attracts so much attention because this is definitely she earned the credit. So Jen Cui, she was a lead inventor or medicinal chemist who invented this molecule when she was in Pfizer, and she later on, went on to found the company called Turning Point. Hope that ring your bell. It was acquired by BMS a few years ago, and now recently she founded another company, I believe called Bloom Hill. So she's a phenomenal medicinal chemist, and she actually, because of the work she did in Pfizer, she was awarded as a member of a National Academy of Engineering in the US. So that's a pretty high bar. So anyway, I want to give the idea of why this abstract attracted so much attention among the especially Chinese American community, because this is really such a big achievement. But regardless, in terms of the commercial and the clinical data, looks like we need to say a little bit more. Anything else you want to add, guys? All right, so next gonna be Madeleine. I think it's yours.
Okay, so is Blenrep back? I think that was another big question from ASCO. This is GSK's BCMA ADC, which was approved and then withdrawn a couple of years ago, I think, because of eye toxicity. And then late last year, we got news of some unexpected wins, I guess. So first of all, Dream7, and then we saw data from that earlier this year, and now Dream8, and we're getting some data here. And these are in like earlier lines of BCMA than Blenrep was previously approved in. I mean, I think these results look promising. There's obviously still tox, but it seems like the investigators feel like it can now be managed. And I think we were just struck by we asked a question outright in the press briefing about whether Blenrep should come back to the US, and I think the investigator just said yes, quite simply. So I think now it's to see what's going to happen from a regulatory perspective and whether these side effects can be managed. I think notably from the trial, there were a lot of dose modifications and interruptions, but not so many discontinuations. So I think the hope is that they can now manage these side effects, but I think that still needs to kind of play out in the real world setting, I'd say.
So Madeleine, actually a question, did you ask the investigator how did they manage ocular toxicity? Because obviously they got a black box, and from the FDA label, sounds pretty scary.
Yeah, I think so too. I wasn't in the session, it was my colleague, but I think what they're doing is like modifying the dose, reducing the dose, to try and mitigate this tox. And at least patients aren't discontinuing, but they are still having the tox. So I think, and then you've got to put it into context of the rest of the BCMA landscape, because you've got things like Carvykti now and Tecvayli. So maybe patients wouldn't want to receive something like Blenrep when they have an alternative. I don't know if and how this will be used in practice, but it's just interesting to see that it is kind of possibly coming back.
I think what I would characterize this study, if I may, is just that I have to give GSK credits to run 2 phase 3 trials. This is the second one that read out positively in this setting. The previous one was Blenrep plus VD versus Daro VD that also read up positive. So you have two positive phase 3 studies that kind of help you, at least trying to help you overcome some of the hesitance after your monotherapy failure. So I looked online with some of the doctors, what they were saying about where they're going to. There were probably less question about whether this is going back to the market. Like Madeleine mentioned, the investigator was like, yeah, this is an option. More of a question of where they want to use it. So I was looking online about some doctors comment. They were envision like two scenarios where they would use this. One is post the Maya trial regimen, which is a Darzalex combination. They would use this after that combination relapse. This is one scenario. The second one would be in third line CAR T patients who were not eligible, was just they couldn't receive CARVYKTI or any other BCMA CAR Ts. This might be an option, but still, this is a large population. Many patients still can't get CAR T, so this might also be an option, perhaps alongside Tecvayli and the other BCMA CAR Ts as an option in the third line setting where CARVYKTI, where CAR Ts are just not practical for the patient.
Yeah, sounds like if a refractory and relapse multiple myeloma is like a knife fight, and GSK finally got a good knife, right? So it's not like they can guarantee to lose, and they can put up a good fight. But let's see how good they are using the knife. All right, next, I think we powered through pretty well, and the next is Madeleine, please.
Okay, so this is Novartis's Scemblix in first-line CML. So this drug is already approved in later lines. Sorry, I'm just looking, third line. And this is potentially to move it into sort of earlier lines of therapy. So what was interesting about this study is that it compared Scemblix versus all second generation TKIs or Gleevec, which is Novartis's older CML drug. And it did seem to show a benefit on this endpoint of molecular response. It seemed quite convincing, and the investigators seemed to think that this was definitely heading towards the first line. Novartis has said that it's filed it via the real-time oncology review program, and it seems to be thinking it will get some response from the FDA in the next couple of months, I think I saw somewhere. But I think the question now is this endpoint, MMR. I mean, I asked the company and they said this is a very well accepted now endpoint from regulators. And in fact, Scemblix's third line approval was based on MMR2. And part of the problem is with CML now, it's become such a chronic disease. This is how they put it, that the patients are surviving so long that it's kind of hard to look at a hard endpoint like survival with this kind of population. But I mean, I have seen, I think Vinay Prasad is the main person I've seen criticizing this. And, he said before that this molecular response is maybe not as strong as some might think. So I mean, it seems like it probably is going to pass through the regulators, but again, I don't know in practice if doctors will be convinced.
Angus, any
yeah,
comments
I don't know.
before I move on?
I just wanted to say that Dr. Prasad is very consistently
Yes.
critical of some of the surrogate endpoints. Very strong, stagnant proponent of OS. So this is, I'm not surprised to see that, just to put it out there. And you probably represent a group of, I don't know the size of it, a more conservative group of physicians who will not budge until they see OS. So just to put that out there, that is probably not the most the most popular idea out there.
Yeah, and he does tend to be more critical than not, but it's just something I think to bear in mind. I mean, I think this will probably get past the regulators, especially as this endpoint has been used before. But I think it's just something to think about. I mean, how I see this playing out is kind of a collection of real world data after approval to maybe look into survival would probably seem like the most pragmatic way of going about it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So Ramon, you have something to say? Anyway, let's move to market moving data. First of all, looks like we agree our predetermined grades to all those like practice trials. Any disagreement? All right. Okay, let's move to market moving data. I'll start with the first one, quick and short. This is actually from the company called Merus. I hope I didn't butcher the name. There had been a lot of talk among investors who invest in this company. And obviously the company, you know, the investor really liked the data. The company, the stock traded up significantly. So let's take a look at what happened. Actually, this is a mechanism I was not really familiar on until the ASCO. And what they did is I believe it's a bispecific antibody. What they are doing, they really work on multiple angle of the EGFR pathway. So you can read from here, the idea is somehow by targeting this target called LGR5, they can enhance the EGFR inhibition as one. And on top of that, of course, this antibody still have ADCC, which is antibody dependent, and cytotoxicity, cellular cytotoxicity, which is like typical, you know, functional antibody, monoclonal antibody would do to kill tumors. So this is kind of like a two weapons packed in the one package. And the data looks very interesting in my opinion. So what they did is in the front line, and this front line head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, and they have a decent ORR, and also in their presentation, the duration response also pretty good. And on top of that, I think the previous study will show that they did observe like monotherapy activity. I think that's something right now, if you're talking about it, most people, people in immuno-oncology space, they would love to say. So people really don't like, monotherapy. There's no monotherapy activity, but just claim they're going to enable PD-1. I think that kind of idea right now have a very, very few audience. So I think this fall into the mainstream. I would say it's kind of a fall into the IO 2.0, at least that's kind of meet the criteria with the monotherapy activity, and when combined with PD-1 have a decent activity. I guess the investor loved it, and the company get rewarded, and that's pretty much one of the winners. Any comments from you guys? What others you heard about this one?
I think.
No, I just want to.
Oh, sorry, Ramon.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to comment on the monotherapy activity. I mean, especially from the BD perspective, speaking with MNCs, they actually really require and they want to see some kind of monotherapy activity in the clinic, right? Otherwise, they just won't be interested in the program.
Yeah, totally. Madeleine?
I was just going to say another note of caution is that the very small number of patients we've seen treated with this so far in an uncontrolled trial in a combination with Keytruda.
Yeah, totally.
They've hit their sort of bull case now with the updated data, but this company, Merus, is valued at like 3.5 billion or something now. So there's quite a lot baked in there, I would say, into that valuation, which makes me quite cautious about this going forward.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, one audience just said like Peto showed the monotherapy activity last year in the same population. So that's confirmed. That's very nice. Let's move on. Next one, I think Madeleine is yours.
Hi. So as well as sort of looking at some of the big studies, I was trying to pick out a few kind of novel targets, and a few of the things coming up are things that are quite novel, maybe under the radar things. This one really jumped out at me. So CES6, I think from looking at our database, Oncology Pipeline, that this is the only project, or AbbVie is the only company looking at CES6 at the moment. They had a previous project that they got from Stemcentrx, and they discontinued that last year in favor of this project, which uses a topoisomerase inhibitor payload. And I want to pick out the data in small cell lung cancer, which is one of those kind of unmet needs that we talk about quite often. And this 61% ORR looks, I mean, again, small numbers of patients, but it looks pretty promising, I thought. And I think this is something to, a project to keep an eye on. I mean, tox, I don't think it was anything that really looked too bad, but there were some dose limiting toxicities at these higher doses, which was the 3 mg per kg and the 3.5 mg per kg. And if you look at that waterfall plot, you can see quite a few of the responses are with that dose. So I kind of wonder going, in the next set of trials, I think AbbVie now has to sort of tread a fine line between benefit and risk. And I think that's the next challenge really with this project, but it's kind of something now that I'll be looking at from now on, I think.
Right. So this molecule was developed by them internally themselves, or did they license this from somewhere else?
I think so. I'm just trying to remember. Sorry, ASCO has been. I think it's internal, unless it's something they got from. No, we've got it as internal. I think it is. So the previous, the Stemcentrx one had this this payload. Sorry.
Yeah, I think
different payload like anyway.
Microtubulin inhibitor, right? Like
yes,
MMA,
exactly.
MMA,
yeah.
Something like that, right? Yeah. That one didn't fly.
No.
They have like a disaster.
If I can add something, I think Madeleine mentioned that they had one in small cell lung cancer that failed, the DLL3 program, the Rova-T had a huge failure with them. So I actually met with AbbVie to talk about something. Their VP of solid tumor pipeline strategy and execution, Pedro, and I asked him like DLL3 recently. Interesting, they're kind of picked up with some of the BD activities there. Would AbbVie being the first one there, having gained some experience there, would it be interested in finding something with DLL3 again? But he was like, we got this new program, this SET6 program. So it sounds like he didn't exactly say no, but it sounds like they won't go after DLL3 again. But they are, in small cell lung cancer at least, they're going to rely on this project.
I think that's interesting because sort of on a cross-trial basis, so obviously Imdelltra is the Amgen product that just got approved in small cell, the DLL3 bispecific. That showed 40% ORR. So, I mean, on a cross-trial basis, this looks better. Obviously, you can't really compare a 23 patient worth of data with a bigger phase 2. But still, I still think it's quite intriguing.
Quick update, someone from AbbVie confirmed this is their internally developed. So case rest.
Excellent.
All right, next is Madeleine, continue.
Yeah, and another sort of kind of under the radar asset here. So this is a KAT6 project from Pfizer. And you've got the monotherapy chart here, but I thought the combo was quite interesting. So they presented results with a monotherapy and in combination with fulvestrant, I think it was. And yeah, that's right. And there were 5 patients in that cohort who had received prior fulvestrant, and 3 of them had a partial response. So that was kind of something that I thought was quite interesting that the investigator highlighted. She kind of slipped into the end of the presentation. So what we had on the slide was like a 30% response with the combo. And at the end of the talk, she just slipped in, oh, by the way, at a later cutoff, we saw 38 ORR. So, I mean, again, yeah, we'll wait to see those actual data. But again, I'd say like small numbers, but kind of intriguing. And the other interesting thing about this is that there's not many other players here. But one of them is Alima, which has a preclinical asset, and they were actually up 21% on Monday, I think, off the back of this data. So, I mean, if this is promising and they've got something, that could be good news for them as well.
Yeah, so this presentation moved the market, but not like helping Pfizer, but another
No.
another smaller company, right?
Exactly.
That's so funny. All right, so I think you're gonna continue. So this one probably
And is this me again? Okay, KRAS. I mean, we had so much KRAS news, I think, recently. And the big thing was Bristol buying Mirati for 5 billion, which seems like a massive deal at the time. And I think as time goes on, it just seems as massive, or if not more massive. Looking at a cross-trial comparison, which I did, which is there on the right of that slide, what's really struck me was how similar these data looked. The Cruzati data from Crystal 12 versus the Codebreak 200 data with Lumacras, which is the Lumacras confirmatory trial. I mean, since those Lumacras data were presented, there were questions raised at this FDA AdCom about trial conduct and the reliability of these data. So, I mean, there's that, but we don't have any OS, any survival data yet for Cruzati. So, I mean, I'm looking to see how this will evolve and how this sort of goes through regulators. Remember, it already has accelerated approval in this second line setting, but this is a confirmatory trial. Yeah, I mean, I just think that Bristol probably overpaid for this. Though it had not much sales in the last quarter, like 20 something million sales. I think it's going to have to do a lot more to justify that price tag.
Yeah, if I may add something to that one, I think first of all, on the last point, I think I saw someone and one analyst note about like it appears that they're buying for the KRAS, but actually there is something in the pipeline that looks interesting. Just put it out there. I forgot what that target is. It might start with a P. I forgot the exact one. So yeah, so that one maybe.
PRMT5, I think.
Yeah. They were
Right,
like maybe
yeah.
they were actually buying that asset rather than the KRAS inhibitor. And again on the data, I mean, Madeleine mentioned these are very similar between the two trials, and also I think I just went into the FDA document, the internal briefing document about that advisory committee meeting, about that ODAC meeting, and in one of their past meetings, the FDA was like talking to Amgen about how much benefit they would want to see. It was somewhere around 3.2 months for the Amgen study. They were proposing this, and the FDA was worried that this wouldn't be clinically meaningful enough for the median PFS. So right now you're only seeing like less than 2 months. I mean, how are you going to convince the FDA about that? And the FDA was saying, I was worried about whether 3.2-month improvement was clinically meaningful enough. And if you can't reach that, I'm gonna want to see an OS benefit, which Bristol Myers Squibb currently doesn't have. So is this going to be approvable, or will the FDA kind of do the same as it did with Amgen, just throw it in the limbo, you just do another confirmatory trial. Let's see how that does. My bet is on the second. So this is because of the sheer size of the median PFS benefit was kind of below the FDA's expectation. The FDA might have adjusted its expectation after that original Amgen ODAC meeting, but I think this is still, by any standard, less than 2 months is a little bit questionable clinical benefit. And without an OS to back it up, this is going to be even more difficult.
All right, sounds like BIM is going to have some strong headwind. Madeleine, please continue.
Sure. So this is Caribou and their allogeneic CAR T CB10. I personally think that Caribou was unfortunately the biggest loser of ASCO. They had I think their shares ended up down like 20 or 30% on Monday. I think the main problem here is, I mean, obviously you're seeing like a weakening of the data. So about a year ago, we saw the initial results in 16 patients. And I think what Caribou's always said, and what's the problem with allogeneic CAR T has been a lack of durability compared to autologous. And what Caribou has always said is that they want to have a product that is comparable to autologous CAR T, and they've used this PD-1 knockout apparently to try and reduce T-cell exhaustion. About a year ago, they had some data which suggested that might be true, but it was only in 16 patients, and then they went on to dose expansion, and that's the data they presented on Monday at the conference, but they also came out on Sunday with the details earlier. Yeah, so this waning response, I think they're now trying to combat this with this HLA matching strategy. So HLA is kind of a way of the body can tell, being able to tell what's foreign and what's self. And I think the idea is that if you can match the donor cells with the patient, you can then extend the time that this is in the body before it gets wiped out by the patient's immune system. At the moment, this is just a theory. Caribou thinks it's got some data to support this, but it's from a retrospective analysis, so it still needs to be confirmed. And because they're doing that, that means they're going to delay the start of their pivotal trial until the second half of 2025 versus the end of 2024 previously. I think there are already questions about that pivotal trial because they want to compare it with chemo and stem cell transplant rather than something like an auto CAR T like Yescarta. And I think the longer that Yescarta is on the market, the more difficult it will be to carry out a trial like that. The more entrenched Yescarta or the other CD9 CAR Ts get in this setting. I also think a big problem for Caribou is how they position this now. Even if it makes it to market, the whole idea of this allo CAR T is that it's more convenient. But now to get this matching strategy, they now think that they'll need to have like 13 batches available to be able to pick the best matched one. And just the whole rationale of having an allo CAR T is kind of not as strong, I think, if that's going to be the case, even if it is good enough to get to the market. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on that.
Yeah, I think this kind of off-the-shelf allogeneic CAR T, I'm not sure, based on my conversation with the big pharma, I haven't talked to all of them, but everyone I talked to, none of them are interested in this idea anymore. So even they become successful, would they be able to pull this off, commercialize everything by themselves? I doubt. So I guess probably that's another wrinkle why investors like, wow, this is just making it more difficult. Anyway, we really have to speed up, gear like up like 20% faster, if everyone could. Madeleine, please finish the whole thing.
Sure, I think this is my last one for a while. I'll try and talk faster, although I already talk quite fast, I think. This is another loser from the conference, but it's J&J, so they can shrug it off. But this is another target that no one else is really working on, and J&J is going really hard on this target, Kellicrain-2. They've got this, which is a radioligand. They've got a CAR T, and they've got a T-cell engager as well, all against this target, which they say is like really highly expressed in prostate cancer. So that's what they're going after. But in the data set we saw at ASCO, there was a fair amount of ILD, and I spoke to someone from J&J who said that ILD is a treatment-related toxicity, and there were 4 treatment-related deaths. 2 of those were from ILD. The others were kind of possibly not related to, they were classed as related, but maybe not, because one was COVID and one was kind of just general decline. But they think they've got a way around it. They're capping the cumulative radiation dose. They are doing this adaptive dosing strategy. Seeing as they're going so hard on this target, I think I'm interested to see whether it's a target problem, which they're convinced it isn't, or if it's like a modality problem. So I think there'll be some data soon on one of the other projects. So it'll be something to keep an eye out on, and maybe the T-cell engager, I think.
Yeah, so funny thing is they use antibody. I'm not sure how many other radiopharmaceutical really use antibody. There's always a debate when you use antibody have a really long blood half-life. This called like off-tumor, off-target toxicity, just because the radio isotope of this killing zone, right? Whatever fall into the killing zone are gonna keep killing, and because they have a long circulating time in the blood, I'm not sure whether that's kind of a contribute to their pretty high toxicity. What do you think, Angus and Ramon, if you have any views on this?
No, my view on antibody, especially in prostate cancer, is it's just too big to really get into the tumor. Prostate is not very it's less vascularized than other tumors. So smaller, binders and smaller peptides would be ideal.
Nothing more
Yeah,
from me.
that makes sense.
That's
let's move on.
interesting, Ramon. Can I just mention, because I was looking at Telix earlier, because they filed for an IPO yesterday, and they've got an antibody based radio conjugate for prostate as well, PSMA targeting one. So let's see what happens with that as well.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, because it's typically been really difficult to treat prostate with antibodies, and we've tried that in my previous company, and we kind of gave up on an antibody. But definitely, there's a lot of smaller peptides, from a bunch of different companies, right? That actually seem to work much better.
All right, so let's move to dark horses and Chinese ADC. The first one, probably I would like to invite Angus. I know you have a piece about this one.
All right, yeah, I think it's hard. You have to live under the rock to not know about this one. So I think this is a data that has some debate about whether you underperform against some historical data, whether this is really. But overall, I think this is still a positive data set that I would say, even though you can't really compare some of the median with the historical data because of some of the cross-trial comparisons. And really, at this point, I think has a ratio you just compare within the trial. This is definitely still a positive study. But obviously, the entire conversation about everything about this asset, about this PD-1 VEGF bispecific was not exactly during ASCO about this study, about this. It's about the monotherapy against the Keytruda study that got a lot of attraction outside of ASCO. There was a head-to-head China-only study where the drug showed I think the Summit Therapeutics, who owns the US rights, was kind of very bullish about it, saying the benefit was really big, I think, in their terms. They showed a significant PFS in first-line PD-L1 positive non-small cell lung cancer. And obviously, there is no data to back them up at this point, but they said the signal was seen across different subgroups, including histology and also PD-L1 expression levels. So obviously, everybody was right now we can't really act anything on it because we haven't seen the data, and also this is also a China-only study. We need to see it in a global trial. But I did ask Merck about what they think about this study, and their CMO at AFR basically was saying that this could be an option if everything pans out in the global study. But he pointed out that there were some efforts to combine, not in the bispecific, but to combine PD-1 with VEGF in the past, including Merck's own studies, including with Keytruda versus plus Lenvima versus Lenvima alone in first-line non-small cell lung cancer. They did also show a PFS benefit, but OS was a little bit hard to show in those combinations. And as we know, in first-line lung, you'd have to show an OS to make a difference here in the United States, even if you pass the FDA with PFS, which I doubt they would be able to. Doctors and payers will still need an OS benefit. And in that sense, I think Adele pointed that out, it's going to be a little bit difficult to show an OS benefit there. So we'll just have to see what it can do. But this is definitely. Oh, and he also mentioned there is a PD-L1 high population, because right now this study was monotherapy versus Keytruda in a PD-L1 positive population, but in reality here in the US, doctors are mainly using Keytruda monotherapy in the PD-L1 high population. So there is definitely, we need to see a little bit whether they can combine well in the PD-L1 kind of low population, PD-L1, as well as a PD-L1 negative population. But again, if you can beat Keytruda, head-to-head, that's a big affirmation for them to say like we're at least better than them as a monotherapy, and it bodes well for them for potential combinations. Leon, if you want to add anything.
Madeleine, I know you also wrote something about this. Any additional colors?
Yeah, I think what I found interesting is this idea of combining the VEGF and the PD-1 together in one molecule. And I didn't speak to Summit about this, but I did speak to someone from BioNTech about this because they have a project that acts similarly as well. And they think that it could be tox, could be the thing that would be better than giving a PD-1 and a VEGF like separately. Because I think the way I spoke to the CMO, and she described it as PD-1 like anchors it to the tumor bed, and then you only get like specific tumor specific action at VEGF as well. I mean, obviously that still needs to be proven.
Didn't they have a PD-L1 VEGF program going on at BioNTech? And I think they haven't made any move in non-small cell lung cancer in the phase 3 in a later line setting at least.
No, we just saw some data at ASCO, and I actually haven't checked out the posters yet, but one was cervical and one was non-small cell, but I can't remember exactly which setting it was in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Just like probably two more colors. The first one is a lot of people kind of read the Baker Brothers investment into Summit as a kind of validation of the technology. But, actually Matt Huber from Stanley pushed back. So, the Baker Brothers also made a mistake before. So don't read too much into that. I just want to throw out there. That's number one. Number two is about, I think right now the investors are so interested in this because, just face it, the Keytruda are going to be like a peak sale in the future over 30 billion. If this for any kind of a real leg in there, get a slice out of that big pie, I think that justify the couple $1 billion because, we are really talking about, taking some slice, tiny slice from like over 30 billion pie. I think that's probably the like investors thinking behind it. Anyway, that's fantastic. Next one, I think still is going to be Angus and Madeleine. Angus, why would you take a swing first?
I actually would like to have Madeleine. I'm not very familiar with this. I'm just very curious about how this is going to play out. I actually have a panel discussion about T-cell therapy later at Bio today. So I'm very curious to learn about like CAR T in solid tumors, which is I think we haven't seen very strong data so far, but apparently this is very promising data from the ORR that I'm seeing so far. So Madeleine.
Yes, again, I didn't actually see this one, but my colleague Jacob Pleath went to this presentation, and he's a bit of a CAR T aficionado, and he thinks this is like the most exciting thing he saw at ASCO. So I think this does qualify as being a bit of a dark horse. Yeah, I mean, solid tumors, CAR T is really not shown much so far, but when you look at those responses, you can see there's quite a few. So I think there's a few potential reasons why this might have worked. I think because this is an AstraZeneca, this is the AbelZeta project, but I think Astra and AbelZeta have some sort of co-development agreement at the moment, and there's talk that this could be to do with the armoring. People were talking about this armoring as being quite interesting. Again, like very late line, quite intriguing. Solid tumors that it's been difficult to get a response in so far, but I mean other projects targeting GPC3, like Takeda had one, haven't gone anywhere. So I think another one that's kind of TBD. But yeah, those response rates do look quite impressive.
Yeah, probably two additional colors. Number one, people say like, what is this company? Must be nobody. No, it's actually a pretty serious company. They changed their name from Cellular Biomedicine Group. So probably that ring a little bit bell. So that's a company who out-licensed their CD20, CD22 bispecific CAR T to J&J last year, like 245 million upfront. They also have an operation in Maryland in the US. So they've been around in cell therapy in CAR T probably like a decade in China, or at least a cell therapy. So they rebranded themselves as number one. Number two, the second color is, look at what the Susan Galbraith said. Actually the construct, I believe originally from AstraZeneca, but they give them to this company because they are very good at running clinical trial in China. So you say what she said here, because this allowed AstraZeneca get the initial data quickly, and and AstraZeneca could leverage this data to file their FDA IND in the US. So that's quite interesting. I remember, probably something Angus can mention that, even including Legend in the early days, Legend kind of started much later compared to, Kite. But Kite, and also the other one, Bluebird, right? In terms of B7 CAR-T, the reason they could catch up so quick because they could do like an investigator-initiated study in China much faster. So that's kind of a unique advantage for those CAR-T company in China. I mean, Apozeta is fully aware and fully leveraging that. I think that's the second color I would add. And looks like a big pharma like AstraZeneca recognized that and exploited that as well.
I think AstraZeneca definitely recognized that they had a recent R&D event where Pascal Soriot, their CEO, was basically saying that we're trying to leverage China's position in the cell therapy place because it allows us to move faster. So this is they were very public about this, like this is going to be an advantage for them to begin this kind of investigator study for them, enable an IND quickly enable an IND study in the US.
All right. So next one is Angus.
Right. This is a bit of a surprise to me. Before I saw the data, I should just put it as maybe I want to cover this because it's a subcutaneous delivery of this kind of EGFR inhibitor from J&J, Rebrevant. Remember, the biggest thing about this is potential combination with this other EGFR, typical EGFR inhibitor, lazertinib, in combination against Tagrisso, potentially in the first-line setting. So the Mariposa trial last year, I think it was ESMO or ASCO, I forgot which one. But definitely this agent for it, the biggest opportunity is potentially in a combination against Tagrisso. But here, that problem, even though they have a better efficacy data against a single agent Tagrisso, there were concerns at least about the convenience side of things, because this is an antibody drug that has to be infused. So right now, J&J is trying at least to improve the convenience side of things by using subcutaneous infusion instead. I think the investigator said this could reduce the administration time from around 5 hours, maybe, and down to like 7 minutes maximum, and 5 minutes, I think, at medium or on the average. So this is a big leap in terms of convenience. So what's special about this is overall survival data. So typically, I was saying, when you look at a subcutaneous study, you look at PK, you want to show non-inferiority, then these drugs are basically similar. But this study showed the subcutaneous version of Rebrevant showed better duration of response, better PFS, and most importantly, better overall survival. And it was statistically significant, 38% reduction in the risk of death. So it was quite a surprising thing. And to me, that says this is basically sub-Q is working better than IV. So I asked J&J, like, do you still want to market IV because sub-Q is convenient, it works better? But by the way, there is the overall survival. The ORR was slightly, very marginally better for the IV versus the subcutaneous. But everything else, DOR, PFS, OS, sub-Q was definitely better. So J&J was saying that they're still going to market IV. So I have no idea why, but maybe there is a market consideration. And also there is definitely the mechanism behind why this sub-Q worked better. So there they were J&J quoting some of the investigators. They hypothesized that this subcutaneous absorption via the lymphatic system might have enhanced the immune-mediated activity of Rebrevant. So J&J was saying that this drug, they developed it they have some immune cell-directed activity by targeting some of the monocytes, macrophages, and then K cells. So there is an immune side of it, and because this subcutaneous version absorption was through the lymphatic system, basically the immune system. So this might have enhanced the immune side of its mechanism. Of course, this is so far still a hypothesis. They don't real reason yet. But this is, to me, is a very surprising study to really show a subQ version that can beat the infused version on overall survival. That's it for me, Leon.
All right, so this is previous Madeleine.
Oh, sure. So I was looking at acasunlimab ahead of the meeting because there's been a lot of attempts to sort of hit these co-stimulatory domains, and 4-1B is one of them. So this is a PD-L1 times 4-1B bispecific. And when we got the data from the abstract, we just got the response rates and they looked pretty underwhelming. And there was also an issue with liver tox in the abstract as well. So I kind of wrote this one off ahead of the meeting in a similar way. And then when I saw the poster data, there was some quite impressive survival data with one of the combo arms. So this study tested both monotherapy and combination of acasunlimab plus Keytruda in like 2 different regimens. And it was the sort of high dose every 6-week regimen of Keytruda that led to an overall survival of 17.5 months. One of the analysts' notes that I got described this as like one of the most impressive results that they'd seen. And remember that this is in PD-1 progressed patients. Sorry, I should have mentioned that too at the start. So that's what makes it particularly impressive, that it's in these patients who've already received PD-1 inhibitors. They're going to start, so this is a collaboration between Genmab and BioNTech, and they're starting a phase 3, I think, towards the end of this year. So another one that I'll be keeping an eye on. I mean, we saw discontinuation of a 4-1BB project earlier in the year from Inhibrx, but when I spoke to BioNTech, they say it's things about their construct, and not all of these projects are created equal, and they think they've cracked it with their one. So let's see if this promise can be replicated again in later trials.
Yeah, fantastic. So that means IO hasn't totally kind of disappeared yet. There's still something kicking. Let's hope hopefully this one gonna make it. Ramon, you want to take a swing of this? You're ADC expert.
Thanks, Leon. Well, it's definitely interesting because there's MNCs right now, right, acknowledge that the innovation and speed of development coming from China is just remarkable. So not only in pharma really or biotech, but also in tech, including AI as well at the moment. So it's definitely exciting times. And I think that a lot of MNCs would agree as well that the China MNC deal making is sure to remain very active within the foreseeable future. But right now, obviously, everybody's looking for first-in-class and novel programs, but we'll see how that goes. These data again, first in human data here for Madeleine, it looks impressive. I mean, I'd like to hear from the panel of what they think. And with Claudin 18.2, this is like the second most popular target, right? And then most companies have a lot of Me Too's in this, so we'll see how this pans out. But obviously the Keymed AstraZeneca data, looks interesting. I'm trying to look at ORR with about what are we looking at here? About 50%, 40 to 50%. So I don't know how that compares with the others. Does the panel have any comments on that? Madeleine or Angus?
Yeah, probably I can try because it's assigned to both of us. I mean, the reason I brought this, I mean, for the first one, actually, I read an analyst report. They said BioNTech specifically tried to carve out the indication to avoid head-to-head competition against Daiichi, because Daiichi also have a HER3 ADC and they're much more advanced. And so that's pretty much what I learned about BioNTech. They openly talk about that. For like, KeyMed, AstraZeneca, I'm pretty sure AstraZeneca going to be set at home. They can go wherever they want because they have one of the largest oncology machine there. So that's also kind of interesting, right? So when the China biotech company try to partner with their ex-China company, they really sometimes have to think about it. Of course, any ex-China biotech or biopharma looks more appealing to the domestic one, but they also have a different level of capability. Like AstraZeneca pretty much move us wherever they feel there's the biggest commercial potential, but BioNTech have to think about how they can make sure don't get trumped by the big guys if they have a similar asset. So what Madeleine and Angus, what's your view?
Well, I can comment
know
a
we can
little
move
bit.
on. Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
all
please.
that, yeah.
Thank you.
On the HER3 targeting, so obviously, at SystImmune we had a EGFR HER3 now with BMS ADC, right? And I think if you look at what is it, patritumab DXd data, right? It's still not as impressive as the bispecifics, but we'll see how obviously, the data still not coming out from BMS on the bispecific EGFR HER3. So I still think the bispecific is gonna have an edge over just the HER3 targeting ADCs.
Other comments before we move on?
Just looking at Claudin 18.2, I mean, Ramon, you mentioned that this is such a big field at the moment, and I've just had a look at our most recent article about this, and there's like 14 or something, just ADCs looking at this target in the clinic, not even preclinical.
Wow.
Yeah, and
so
I heard
it's very
there's
popular.
Yeah, and I heard there's like about 100 in China that are, in preclinical,
Yeah,
something like
probably.
that. It's crazy, right? It's just below HER2. And so, obviously KeyMed has a leg up here with AstraZeneca because like Leon said, AstraZeneca is going to really push this, right? And then they have the muscle to do it. I guess my question really is, is there still a market for 18.2 for the other ADCs that are coming in? I suppose it depends on the data, so we'll see.
Yeah, totally. So I think that's.
They said anything about indications beyond JJ cancer, GI cancers? Potential indications? Ramon?
Leon, I know, I don't know.
No, I don't recall. I'm pretty sure they are. Otherwise, why would I ask? For the big pharma, right now, by the way, there's another quick, interesting discovery kind of confirmation, especially for ADC. If any a company try to partner with a big pharma, they will pretty much one of the very first question they can ask you is, what's the peak sale you think there's going to be? If it's below 1 billion, you can just leave now. So I don't know how big the GGJ market really is. And some company asking for 1 billion as a minimum. Some actually even ask 1.5 billion. I don't know. I mean, this GGJ, I think especially like China, I'm not sure it's that big. So I'm guessing very likely they have other indication they can go after. So because there's like a small indications out of fashion nowadays, especially oncology for ADC.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
it's got to be at least $1 billion market. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. So I think right now, Ramon, you're going to take the lead because you are there. Before we get into the hot button issue, I want to, first talk something not so controversial. I know you have been talking to a lot of partners. Can you share with us the hot topics area in deal making? By the way, if Angus, you saw anything, please chime in. Neither Madeleine and I were there, so we are here to learn.
Yeah, well, most of this really came from panels, right? And this is not going to come as a surprise because obviously, we know what's going on. We know ADCs are hot, right? I mean, so that's the question is really how long is it going to remain hot? If you really think about, you know, the data that came out from AZ and Daiichi, right? The TROP2 DXD, you know, it was modest, right? I mean, it wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be. But right now, it's ADCs are still hot, but again, it has to be, you know, first in class. So novel targets are really what they're looking for, and also multi-specifics now that, you know, the companies are really thinking about, you know, the multi-specifics because they tend to work a little bit better, right? In addition to that, the second gen payload and linkers is also important, but they don't want to combine a novel target with a novel payload. That's kind of, you know, that too risky for
I
them.
see.
But again, yeah, stable linker and I think the payloads that actually work after topo 1 is actually also interesting, right? Just because if you really think about in HER2, if you can come right after in HER2, that's a huge market, right? And T cell engagers are kind of coming back. The only issue they have is there's some safety concern there. They just need some safety data in regard to making sure there's no cytokine storm. Um, but so essentially for T cell engagers, they do want some safety data, but that's also, you know, a hot area right now. And as you know, targeted degraders. Yeah, interesting enough, there's no mention of radiopharmaceuticals, so I don't know how long that's really going to be, you know, in vogue. You know, there's some challenges with radiopharmaceuticals, but I do like radiopharma as well, especially when combined with IO. I think you know, radiotherapy works really, really well in that combination. So, and also there's concern about cost now with multiple combinations because now you're looking at, you know, 2 or 3 different compounds and modalities combined. You know, how far can you go? How far can you push the payers? Any comments
So
from
to follow on your
audience?
last point, do you think that's kind of one of the appealing point for, let's say, ivonescimab, but you know, like the PEGF and the PD-1 from Akeso and Sami, in terms of a cost? Let's say even like their you know, clinical profile pretty much identical to Pembro plus Avastin, turn out they're cheaper. Would that be interesting or moving the needle in terms of the market share? What's your view?
Yeah, it depends on how big the market is, but yes, right? I mean, we're talking Keytruda here market, right? Like you said, it's a $30 billion market. So if you can get, I don't know, 10% of that, that's 3 billion right off the bat. And
Yeah,
as Madeline said, I mean, I've talked to other companies who are developing, you know, a similar bispecific, and they say the same thing. It's actually supposed to be safer, right? Because there's less VEGF related toxicities with a bispecific. But you know, it's good to be first because all the others are just kind of gonna try to catch up, and I don't think the
yeah.
data is going to be any different, right? Unless well, what's interesting about the bispecifics and especially just going back to the system immune technology is that um, you know, there's actually 2 binders on each side for each, right? So it's almost like, you know, 2 antibodies back to back, right? Like this. Um, so that to me, I think it increases avidity and in my mind, I think it works better than just the, you know, the single binders from each side. So
I see.
yeah, partly
So now
technology
move,
also works.
yeah, so move
Good.
to the second point, you know, how does the biopharma choose among, you know, clinical supply collaboration, out licensing, or just buy the company outright? What's a formula in their mind?
Well, number one is how much it is, right? You know, there's a point where partnering or licensing becomes an acquisition when the party that, you know, they want to, or at least the drug that they want to acquire, and the party's asking for too much, right? And there's an inflection point there. But what was interesting to me, and that's why I raised this, was that there was a panel with Ken Sung from Race Bio, right? And his opinion was that partnering should be the last resort. And he was saying, look, you always go into a partnering uh, discussion with the right intention, but it's actually very difficult in the long run to manage or for alliance management. And So you have to be very selective with your joint development committee members, joint steering committee members. But at the end of the day, you lose control over it. So it's almost like in his mind, might as well just sell the product or sell the company. In my mind, I actually disagree with that. It really depends on what you want, right, and what your exit. Because I think his exit was like, I'll just go sell it and I'll be done, right? If you want to build a company, it's really better to partner with a reputable company like BMS or J&J to co-develop and co-commercialize, and become a multinational company, especially for a Chinese company starting out. So that's my view of it. But in regard to supply versus out licensing, my view of supply collaboration, like clinical supply collaboration, where the big pharma supplies the drug for free, is that there's nothing's for free. And so you have to be very careful about the hooks that they put in that supply agreement, because it could really hamper your ability to partner your drug later on. Say, for example, they may put restrictions on what you can do with the data, right? Or maybe you can't share that data with anybody else. And then that hampers you, right? You've got good data, but then you can't partner. Or then they have first right of refusal. Then you have to really negotiate with them first, and then you can't really run a competitive process. So just be very careful of that. But it's not bad. I mean, you get free drug, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's better that if you can afford the drug, just buy it yourself, right? And then just partner later.
Yeah, fantastic. I think, right now, especially the capital is pretty tight. A lot of biotechs are probably, the clinical supply collaboration is not like a nice to have. The mass do this, we just feel they are a little bit short on cash. That's all really good points. Now let's move to this interesting news. I know I would really love to hear from Ramon and Angus. We just found this out a few hours ago. So actually this news broke out from South Korea news outlet. I think that's probably from the name, the Korea Times, must be legit, right? Otherwise they were not audacious enough to call themselves the Korea Times. So let's assume the news is real, and there's a kind of announcement made among the public officials from the 5 countries / area. That's like the United States, South Korea, Japan, European Union, and India, to have this biopharmaceutical alliance. What do you think? Have you ever heard anything about this since they kind of announced this publicly?
I
That's
can.
what they say.
Not really, and it's interesting because the official reasoning for it, right? They're saying they launched it in response to drug supply shortages during the COVID-19 pandemic, which I think may or may not be true. But the Korea-US alliance actually was started in last year, right? December 2023, and then they just expanded it to Japan, India, and Europe. So definitely has something to do with the Biosecure Act, I think. And obviously a step that you need to take anyway, because especially if you're going to lose China supply, you need to figure out where to get it outside of China. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Well, if I may add a few things, I think just because we don't know the details of this alliance, like what exactly are they going to do, this is more of a show of alliance, if you will, to me, rather than, because the US is not content with just having an alliance of supply chain. The US is really aiming for onshoring some of the biopharmaceutical manufacturing, not really including some of the friendly countries, if you will. So it's very much in the US they're pushing for. So the fact that this came from the Korean news outlets might also show this in terms of the level of commitment, I think, from the US into this, like what material what material specific collaborations that might be coming from this alliance. I think it's just we just need to see about that. But this is definitely a show of solidarity in terms of these are the friendly guys that we're friends with each other, and not including China in this is definitely has the Biosecure Acts in there somewhere. So, but I think just because the U.S. didn't announce this and didn't make a very big deal out of it, is also very strategic thinking to not provoke China further, to really keep this a little bit under the radar, a little bit quieter. I think this is also part of the thinking to have some alliance, but still pushing for onshoring of manufacturing inside the United States. That is.
I remember you said you are about to interview John Crowley. So have you
right?
I
already talked to him yesterday, but because the story hasn't come out, I wouldn't be able to talk a lot about it. But still, I asked him a lot about the Biosecure Act. I think the general sentiment is I can say is there is probably no going back from the Biosecure Act. That's no matter what we wish for, that's probably not. And there is definitely what the US might be thinking of doing from here is because the Biosecure Act is about disruption. It's about blocking a whole group of Chinese CDMOs from the US market. So we can think about as disruption. But the US need to think now how to rebuild a new system, and it needs to go in parallel with the destruction. Otherwise, U.S. patients would be hurt. And there is also questions at Bio. I talked to a few CDMOs. I was like, capacity may be easy. Like if WuXi has, for example, sorry if I mentioned any company by name, if they have a factory here and now they are not going to use it, you might be able to buy a new factory, and you can invest in new factories. But there are so many elements of the Chinese CDMOs that you might not be able to match, like cost, like some of the efficiency, like the speed, some of that. And one of the CDMOs that I talked to, foreign Western CDMOs, is like, we just have to match it right now. If the Biosecure Act, we must specify right here, the Biosecure Act has not become law, it's still processing. So if that day really comes, they just have to match it. But right now, obviously, the U.S., at least the Western CDMO industry, is not there. There is definitely some differences in terms of services and scale and speed and cost between Chinese CDMOs. So that is something I think the U.S. needs to think about, how to rebuild that system while they're trying to destroy the current.
Well, I guess we signed the pink color is fair. Probably sounds like it could be like a really like a screaming red, as even that could be justified. Let's just leave it as this. I'll finish the last one real quick. You have this kind of crazy ideas: the Chinese innovation plus U.S. clinical development plus global BD and fundraising, definitely in the U.S. capital market, equals to potential success. So there's just another quick like case study just announced yesterday. So this is the China biotech, public biotech traded in Hong Kong, and they had a deal announced with the US biotech traded at NASDAQ. And so the Chinese one have a pretty established capability of antibody development, have some product on the market, but they have not getting any product on the US market, unless innovative drug yet. On the other hand, Arvin, I don't think it have very strong drug discovery. They really rely on licensing, innovative asset from China. So this is not their first one. I think this is their like a third or fourth one from China already. They already have one, which is EGFR small molecule for exon 20 deletion for non-small cell lung cancer in pivotal trial in the US, probably going to submit the NDA very soon. So this is really something they add to their pipeline in the future. Of course, the oncology specialists are relevant, so this is a no-brainer. They're going to get into ADC. So just a really nice example. All right, I think we powered through everything, really just like a couple minutes late. Now we can open for the question. And I want to remind everyone again, if you have any question, please put in the Q&A box and we can go through them. I would really encourage, the audience. I know a lot of them. Actually, even our Zoom only have 100 people, but we have 1,000 people from different platforms. Please send your question to the platform and our coordinator gonna bring them to our system. In the meantime, if you like the slides and a lot of information, please subscribe to our webinar. By doing that, you would be able to save the slide deck and this only to the subscriber. In the meantime, feel free to follow us on the LinkedIn. All right, with that being said, I will leave stay on this page so you can scan them and follow us and go through the question. So the first one actually is Mayun Zhang to everyone is, are there any clinical progress reported for siRNA or antisense oligo drugs and ASCO? Anyone?
I don't remember seeing anything, but it might have been like a small, obscure project. But I didn't see anything major from that kind of modality.
Yeah, me neither. And also probably I can also share when I talk to those, I have met probably a dozen of biopharma, big biotech, BD or R&D people. Not even single time there is, they are interested in the siRNA or ASO for oncology. My understanding siRNA and ASO is really for chronic diseases, right? Just follow what our line ionists are doing. They are not in oncology, to my best knowledge. Probably they have something earlier. So the quick answer is no. All right, there's another question from Yang Yun. What are your insights on Daiichi Sankyo's ADC pipelines and their 5-year business plan, particularly given their strong focus on the ADC segment? That's a strategic thinking. Ramon, I saw you unmuted yourself. You want to take a first try?
No, because it's tough to answer that question without being at Daiichi, right? I just think first their success with Enhertu is just amazing. I think they really cracked the process for really figuring out the balance between efficacy and safety, right, for ADCs, and they really started the frenzy for ADCs. The topo one, I think, is still to me, from what I can tell, is still really a very good and maybe even the best payload out there. But everybody's now looking for what's next, right? Because the topo one obviously works, especially if you have a DAR 6 or a DAR 8. And so my guess is Daiichi should and probably is, unless you guys know, probably developing at least a second gen, right? A linker payload. Their linker isn't the most stable, and there's a lot of technologies out there that have much more stable linkers, right? And so that decreases toxicity. So they need to do something, right? For further future pipeline. And then find again good linker payload. They can in-license it. There's a lot of technologies really coming from China, right? And innovation coming from there. So what I would say, and I know for a fact that even companies like for example Seagen before their merger with Pfizer, I mean they were still open to looking at second gen, third gen linker payload technologies. Yeah.
I've got a question about that actually, Ramon. Do you have any insight into why Dato-DXd doesn't seem to be as effective as Enhertu? Is it just about the target rather than the construct?
It's a target and it's also the indication, right? Lung is just a tough one, and so it's both, and maybe you need a more toxic payload, but just going back again to BLBO1D1, just better targets, right? EGFR plus HER3, at least from the data that we have so far, and we've seen so far, it works pretty good in both, EGFR mutant and wild type lung cancer. So, and that's the similar payload, right? Topo1.
Yeah. So one
I
more
got you.
color about ADC. It looks like really something people are curious. So based on my conversation with the BD and R&D people, and Ramon, please add on. And there's a two category. I think those are potential partners. Some of them already in ADC that really want to double down on this modality. So for them, even like incrementally innovative ADC with the clinical data, but with the definite peak sale potential over 1 billion, they are interested. That's for like the the front running big pharma. But for the kind of have other options, to put this way, because we cannot name a specific company or someone specifically said they are not into ADC, but actually secretly they may. For those kind of a category, they really have to be next generation ADC, which means if you just do a lipid linker, stability improvement, incremental, they're not interested at all. Need to be really, really different, and probably like two different payload, right? Really address, you have a clear data show that you can address the HER2 refractory resistant patient population, right? With a multi-billion or even like 10 billion market potential. They're willing to, seriously consider enter this market because they are not in the market yet. So they realize they are too late for the first train, right? They are willing to jump on the second train in this kind of attract to ADC dominance. So I think that's kind of what my general feeling in terms of, when I talk to a dozen of partners and ASCO. So what's your feel, Ramon? Please go ahead.
If I may add something beyond, I talked to a couple like ADC biotechs here at Bio. I think there is, everybody was talking about a stable linker and also the DAR being able to hit 8. And the thing is, I don't think everybody still is certain in terms of whether this next generation, which one of them, or if there is a success code that you could follow to just make sure that you're successful. So I think there is some kind of scatter the net and see what's going to come up. It's just that big pharma companies are investing everywhere in different companies, different technologies, different ADCs to see which one actually works best. So you kind of, I think there is kind of you sort of see that several ADC companies, all of them get partner up with some big pharma companies, and you see one company, for example, BMS, tapping into different companies' technologies for different indications or different targets. So this is something that we're still not fully, we have yet to fully understand the next generation. What's that going to look like, even among the ADC players?
Yeah, just to add to that. So basically, if you have, the next gen, what at least the big pharma players are looking for is some clinical validation, right? So they're typically not going to jump on it because there's so many techs out there, right? And so you need at least some clinical data to show safety. And the DAR really is dependent on, the potency of the payload, right? Because obviously you don't want to put too much on there if your payload's too potent. But as long as you have, the problem there, if your payload's too potent, is that you have to have a clean target. Otherwise, you run into issues with toxicity. That's the big Achilles heel of ADCs, right? But I also agree with Leon. The big pharma, incremental improvements is okay with them, right? Because they can really push it. But the smaller guys want, a lot more.
Fantastic. All right, we run gross over time. So 1 or 2 sentences closing remark. Probably start with Madeleine on the same order.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. It was my first ASCO, so I find it in-person ASCO. So I find it difficult to know if it was more or less exciting. I heard some comments that it was a bit quieter maybe than previous years, but there do seem to be, there's it's always a big pharma conference. There was a lot of big pharma news, but there were quite a few other like novel and I thought quite exciting targets that I'll be following now. So I found it really interesting from that perspective.
Welcome to ASCO. You're gonna like it, and you're gonna get addicted to it. Angus?
Yeah, same here. As Madeleine said, this is a little bit of a on the quieter side of an ASCO. We'll just need to see what some of the later data, some of the conferences, we can see some of the more real breakthrough therapies. But I'm sure they're coming. That's it for me.
Ramon?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I missed ASCO. I love ASCO. I actually prefer to go to ASCO than Bio. Bio this year, I didn't attend Bio last year, but this year seems to be a little quiet as well. Not too many people, but I still run into a lot of colleagues and a lot of friends from big pharma. So, I mean, there's still a lot of interest in partnering. A lot of them actually came from ASCO, right? And it's unfortunate that they overlap. And that's the biggest issue I had was that some of my contacts just couldn't make it to Bio, right? Because they would rather be at ASCO, especially, they would rather see clinical data, right? Rather than preclinical and early stage. But overall, I think I had really good meetings and Bio is Bio. So
Fantastic. So I only have one sentence. For me, actually, I'm really doing BD. My ASCO is more productive than JP Morgan, believe it or not. And that also probably tell you I have more clients in oncology than all the other diseases. So, I get to meet the BD as well as the R&D, especially clinical development team, and the same conference is really, really productive, actually. All right, that's all we have. Thank you so much, Madeleine and Angus and Ramon. And I hope this is not a last time, definitely just a beginning of many more collaboration. I'm pretty sure audience would love to see you come back again in the future. With that being said, take care and see you next time. Bye for now.